Hi, everyone. Another session at AGS Virtual Summit. I'm very happy to be here. I'm Thomas, and I'll be discussing on the specificities of subscription apps today. We're talking subscription apps because it's been growing and it's a main driver of growth for Apple. They're very keen on making it grow further. It's got a bunch of benefits that we'll go through, but one of the big benefits for you is that it's the only official way to move the store fee to half of the usual 30%. So definitely a promising thing for developers here. If we look at market trends, subscription model has been growing a lot. I put sources from App Annie, Sensor Tower, and Apps Flyer here. Basically, it's all up and to the right. What's interesting is when we look outside of gaming, which is still the big driver of revenue in the stores, subscription are the almost entirety of business now. It says here 96%. So it really took over paid apps and IAP over the last 4 or 5 years, and the key driver of growth for a lot of non-gaming developers. The biggest one being YouTube and Tinder, since Netflix and Spotify have gone out. What we'll be looking at today is how a developer should look at it through the lens of the pirate metrics. And I'll start on the retention side, which I think is the most important of the steps, way ahead of acquisition or monetization. And the first thing to know about subscription is there are very different kind of subscription where the retention tactics and levers are going to be entirely different. I personally group them into three. One that is related to content, that can be music, video, also news, books, comics, and so on, where usually the big retention lever is the amount of content you're offering. And that's the reason Netflix is investing 17 billion this year on adding new contents. No matter how good the product of Netflix or SoundCloud is, you're going to stick to your subscription because there's new things to watch and listen and read. There's another group that I call motivation subscription, which is the one I work most on personally. I group them under motivation, but they can come from very different verticals, such as education, health and fitness, dating, and even within those verticals, subcategories, like in education, you would have language learning, you would have brain training. So there's a bunch of different cases, but usually these different apps obey to the same retention mechanics, which are very different from the content. Let's say you've got a recipe app. You can have 2,000 recipes instead of 500. It's not necessarily going to improve retention significantly. It's more about how you onboard people and how you keep re-engaging them. And they're very different mechanics from content. The last subcategory would be utilities, such as Dropbox or Grammarly or video editors, which is also a very big driver of the subscription revenue, where again, the mechanics would be slightly different. It doesn't matter so much on content, but rather the value you provide to people using those utilities on a regular basis. So we would have to get specific to each, but definitely don't take for granted anything that is general for subscription, because it will adapt to what kind of subscription you're really selling. And something that is very helpful in trying to improve your subscription is to keep the meaning of subscription is people will keep paying because you keep providing values. And that is very different from other verticals. I saw this example from Nate Weiner, where you say in food, you've got the burger, you eat it, 10 minutes later, the value is pretty much gone to zero. If we take subscription products, in particular in the utility group, such as Evernote here on the graph, as you use your subscription more, it becomes even more valuable. That's particularly true for subscription that relies on algorithms such as Spotify or YouTube, where they get to learn you better. And the more you use it, the more value it gets. And that's where the subscription model makes a lot of sense, because you will keep providing more value and people will keep basically paying because the value is going up. And that's very different from other models such as IAP or ads. When you look at the retention of your subscription apps, One thing that is extremely important to do is to segment your user based on their status. You want to engage in very different action on the different buckets. I've illustrated here how the retention curve are looking completely different based if you look at paying subscribers or free users. And one thing that is very tricky here is the people who are in a free trial period, because they're going to end up being in one or the other bucket, but you don't really know yet until the end of the free trial period. And they usually need to be segmented and re-engaged in a very, very different way. So the dotted line here of the sum of all these different buckets is actually not very helpful to move retention metrics. After retention, as of monetization, subscription have a very particular funnel. They're quite complex and they're quite different from other kind of apps. In particular, when you consider the free trials, but also the refunds. Like refund is something that can happen in the store also for other in-app purchases, but it's usually very small. Whereas in the subscription business, it can grow pretty big, and that is quite complex from a data point of view to go through, but that you definitely want to take into account. And lots of people ask me, okay, what are the typical benchmark of conversion from trial to paid or on the renewal rates? And the thing here is benchmarks are very, very hard to find, but they're also not extremely useful, because depending on the type of subscription you have, on the duration of the subscription, on the price point and other differences, it makes the number change completely. The trial to payment conversion can be 70%, it can be 30%. 30% is not necessarily bad. If you've got a very high price point, a very long free trial period, it's expected that it's going to be lower. So be very careful what you compare with, as other subscription might have a completely different shape of funnel. And it makes comparing an app to another particularly complex. So more than ever, look at how you're improving your own app rather than how you're doing compared to other apps. One thing that makes subscription specific is how the revenue is coming over time. And when you look at the shapes of lifetime value of users, they tend to look very different from ads and IAP. How user will decay and churn, and how the money will eventually come in, which will differ vastly if you're using monthly or quarterly or yearly subscription as well. I try to graph it here how it usually looks for subscription, but again, it will depend a lot on your model. And one thing you want to particularly take into account is not only the lifetime value, but when the money is coming back. You want to check how much money you're making per paying user, the RPPU, but you also want to check when this money is coming in. In the case of a yearly subscription, you would have all the revenue for the whole year coming up front on the first day, which obviously for cash flow is a net positive. Maybe the monthly subscription has a higher LTV, but you're going to need to finance this cash flow over 6, 8, 9 months ahead, and that makes consideration very differently when you're looking at profitability. One thing that is a bit of the unknown is in this bit special period of COVID, is we actually have no idea how this cohort will evolve. It's a new situation where all our assumptions from the past on free trial conversion, refund, renewals might be shaken down. It's quite early to know, but you want to be very careful about assumptions you made from the past into future conversion when there are troubled times like this. To improve monetization, for sure, you want to iterate on paywalls. I linked a more detailed article here that is quite developed and interesting. One thing that I often see is people focusing a lot on iterating on the paywall itself, but not enough on how people get to reach that paywall. And I think it's at least as much important all the education and communication you made before you're showing this price screen, rather than iterating nonstop on the price screen itself. So of course, you want to do both, but never lose sight that how people reach that screen can have at least as much impact as iterating on the screen itself. And there's a lot of things you can do on this paywall. Be careful measuring trial and uplift on paywall, because sometimes getting too aggressive or forcing the conversion too much can actually hurt not only long-term LTV with renewal and refunds in particular, but also user retention. If you push people too hard into the subscription, it's more likely that they might churn later. So you want to be extremely careful about measuring long-term impact and not only the funnel of this particular screen. There's another very detailed article from my colleague Jacob, who's a pricing optimization specialist for subscription, that details a lot these challenges that we have on iterating on the paywall. And you still get a few learnings from him that is summarized at the end. One learning I had through different apps that I also saw on a subscription forum called Subclub is a lot of the conversion happened at the very early on. Like most people will subscribe within the first week in a subscription business, and this leads that if you put the paywall too late, you already have churned a lot of users before they even reach the paywall. And something that is quite aggressive but efficient for a lot of people is bringing paywall quite early in the experience. So you might want to try that if you haven't. The article is very detailed about other tactics and learning. I really recommend you dig a little bit deeper into that. The data behind it can be quite messy. What Apple and Google are sharing in the console is really hard to reconcile with your own product experiment, also with marketing data and acquisition data. You could build your own. I went through this process with 3 different companies, and we ended up making it work, but through a massive amount of resources. We did that because no tools were existing back then, 4 or 5 years ago. Revenue Cat has emerged since. I really recommend it really highly because it just makes everything pretty simple. It's even free when you're starting and you don't have a lot of recurring revenue. This will take a lot of hassle out, and you can relate directly to your product experiment. You could link the data to Facebook. So in the build or buy debate, I really recommend that you focus on your core business and get a tool that is becoming reference for the whole subscription industry. We also have a very nice, interesting blog if you're interested in the subscription topic. And yeah, so monetization, be careful about long-term effects, iterate on your paywall, and manage messy data through reliable tools. When it comes to acquisition, which is stated as the first layer of the pirate metric and that I like to put last myself, you've got a few challenges. First, on the organic side of things, the price point of subscription and the fact that paid subscriber get a lot more values than free subscriber make usually virality a bit tougher than non-subscription app, and that might be something you want to iterate on, but you will know that you're limited compared to a completely free app or app that monetize through ads, and it's perfectly normal. And because most users will not become paid subscriber, at least 90%, 95%, in some segment 99%, a lot of the users are not going to experience the full value of your app. That's a little bit of a problem for ASO because Google in particular is taking retention as a core factor to rank you higher. So here, my tip would be try to focus a lot on what kind of experience you're providing to free users. Of course, you want to optimize for revenue, but focusing only on your paying subscriber can have a big negative impact on organic, both virality and ASO, and that's something you don't want to exclude 95% of people from your app because you're on a freemium model. So check that out. The other one is bad reviews in the stores, which are quite common. A lot of users are still a little bit confused by the free trial scheme and would call you even a scammer just because they didn't understand they would be charged. Here you have to communicate very clearly, and that's where, when being too aggressive, it can actually hurt yourself. If you're pushing people into the funnel too hard, you will pay it not only on long-term conversion, but also with a bunch of bad reviews here that I think pushes subscription apps to provide exceptional, outstanding customer service so that you will answer these people and explain them why this happened, and that also explain why there's so much refunds. On the paid acquisition side, you've got also very specific challenge to subscription. One, I think, is to communicate clearly about the free trial. Like I said before, I personally usually avoid mentioning the free trial too much in external communication, as it creates more bad reviews and worse retention on this bucket. So you want to be smart about that. There's one thing that's great about subscription is because most of the conversion happen very early on, a high percentage in the first day or 2 days, it gives you bullets to feed back to the networks, and typically on Facebook or Google where algorithmic optimization has taken over. And having early data is great because you can feed these data points in the first 1 or 2 days, which really helps. But at the same time, the data point you have here is usually just a free trial. And those could be misleading. If you push too hard towards the free trial, you also might hurt payment conversion and attract the user who are most likely to not convert after the trial. And that's a challenge that is a bit tough to deal with. There are a few tactics I can share about how to fight this problem in the next session. But I want to stick within time, so I'll fit to that. And the last one, I talk about algorithmic optimization. Most of the time on subscription is based on events. The most advanced product from Facebook and Google are value optimization. Google call it TROAS, which I dubbed here VO. I explained in a recent article on Singular why this model is usually not particularly suitable for subscription because you've got low variance between your user. Basically, users have almost a binary state of they're paying subscriber or not, but you don't have whales like in gaming. And if every paying subscriber is paying roughly the same amount, it makes value optimization a lot harder to work. And that's why most subscription apps use event optimization and not value. All right, I think that was a nice introduction to specificity of the subscription business. I'm going to stick a little longer with you guys and open and ask me anything so we can dig into your specific case or maybe detail something that I explained today and that was not completely clear. Thank you very much.